Today we are going to discuss the ideal tragic hero as explained in the Poetics written by Aristotle. In the second chapter of the Poetics, while examining the objects of poetic imitation, Aristotle says that men whose actions and experiences poetry imitates may be either better, higher, or worse, lower, or the same as they are in actual life. The third variant Aristotle merely mentions and then ignores. He is wholly concerned with the other two. That means higher or worse. The poet may represent men as heroic or exaggerate their follies and weakness. He may idealize or may caricature, present men in ludicrous light. And this is the difference between tragedy and comedy. Tragedy idealizes, imitates men as better or higher, and comedy caricatures, that is, shows men as worse or lower than they actually are. Tragedy idealizes and brings out the hidden possibilities embedded in men. The characters in a tragedy are real men and women, but they are of the better sort. And further, by judicious processes of selection and elimination, the reality is heightened and the good in them is made more prominent and impressive. A skillful painter paints from reality. It is still reality, but reality idealized. In the same way, the poet has reality as his basis. He depicts real men and women, but he idealizes reality, and so he represents men finer and nobler than they actually are. Here we are discussing the term Hamartia, the ideal tragic hero, as Aristotle explains. Now we move on to the essentials of characterization. However, it is only in chapter 15th of Poetics, that Aristotle deals with characterization on an extended scale. He lists four essentials of successful characterization. Four essential things we find in the hero, ideal hero, that is Hamartia. The first one is goodness. The characters must be good. A character is good if his words and actions reveal that his purpose is good. So, a good man will be considered good only if his purpose is good. In ancient Greece, women were considered as inferior beings and slaves as worthless. This was the society at that point of time, Greek society, in which women were considered inferior to men, and there were slaves which were considered as worthless. But Aristotle says that when introduced in a tragedy, even women and slaves must be shown to have some good in them. Entirely wicked characters, even when assigned minor roles, are unfit for tragedy. Wickedness may be introduced only when required by the necessities of the plot. So, Aristotle always wanted that tragedies should be moral in some sense, and wickedness should not be encouraged or promoted at any level. Wanton or willful introduction for wickedness must be avoided. He does not want wickedness to be shown in a willful or wanton manner, because people get inspired and people begin to imitate or emulate those things which are shown in the drama. So, the whole society might be corrupted. And he further says, and when introduced, even wicked characters must be made good in some respects. So, something good coming out of bad. Wickedness must be mixed up with some good, as in actual life. Nobody is completely wicked, we can say. In other words, Aristotle favors complex characters. He always favored complex characters. Nowadays, we call them as round characters. Characters which undergo a process of change, and those characters which are not static in nature. So, Aristotle favors such kind of actors or characters. Aristotle favors complex characters, just as a successful painter makes his portrait more beautiful than the original. A successful painter makes his portrait more beautiful than the original and still retains the likeliness to the original. In the same way, poet must represent his characters better and more dignified and must still preserve the likeness to the original. Aristotle's use of the Greek word Christos for good has given rise to a hot controversy. It has been variously interpreted by various critics. Corneille, the French critic, for example, interpreted it to mean magnificent, and Talfourd in recent times has interpreted it to mean dramatically effective. So, there is no consensus between the critics. And we move further, and in Greek sense, the word goodness implies a number of virtues such as courage, magnificence, temperance, liberality, friendliness, etc. In any case, a negative cloistered virtue is not good unless he is desiring specific positive good ends and working toward their achievement. Goodness, according to the Greek conception, lay not in endurance or humility, but in strength and intensity of character, in the greatness of soul. So, we can say, above all, they must not be weak, for weakness is the hardest to justify on stage. It is not easy to justify weakness on the stage. So, the first characteristic or the essential of characterization is complete, and we will move on to the next thing, that is appropriateness.